Welcome to selfdiscoverywisdom.com, formerly known as Self-Discovery Media. On these podcasts, you're going to hear people who speak from the heart. They've taken the journey in life. Many things have happened to them, but they've changed it to happening for them. And in their strength, their courage, they've discovered their abilities and their wisdom, and they are now sharing it here with you. Do enjoy each show. We bring it to you with love and knowing that it's going to help you on your journey of life. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of our Global Veterans right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy, and my guest today, joining me all the way from Spain, is David Brown. We're going to be talking about his new book, Hard Rain. What does it mean? Well, that's what we're going to dive in here to find out. Awarded medals by Queen Elizabeth II for his 40 years in the British Army, retired Major pens a powerful war novel is set in the 1970s Northern Ireland. David Brown is a lifelong military man from the British Army who received medals from Queen Elizabeth for his bravery throughout a successful 4-decade military career. He has not fired a shot in so many years, but all the bloody battles fought in his lifetime live in his head, his heart, and his soul. He brings to life what really felt like to fight the enemy, even when winning felt like losing. That's a heavy price to pay for peace on all sides, he says. Both three novels out are each inspired by the military experiences that began for him at the tender age of 15. He left a household in poverty and dropped out of school to become a soldier. From 1969 to 1976, he witnessed and participated in fighting for Great Britain against the IRA, Uprising for Freedom Fighters in Northern Ireland. At just 15, he left home to join the British Army. Driven by a deep sense of duty and desire for purpose beyond the life he knew, over a remarkable 40-year military career, he fought numerous battles across the globe, witnessing both chaos and camaraderie that only war can forge. His service was recognized by the Queen, who awarded him medals, but now serves a quiet reminder of sacrifice and honor. The brutality of war left a lasting impression, compelling him to write these three novels, fictionalized accounts drawn from the truth of the battlefield experiences. He speaks candidly about the visceral intensity of hand-to-hand combat and the haunting paradox of feeling a deep, private respect for the very enemy that he was trained to destroy. You know, war is a heavy thing. I'm very anti-war, but I know that at times we have to take up arms. And, you know, it's a pity that we can't sit down and talk about it, but we're not trained as people from the beginning to do that. We're not trained to negotiate. We're trained to fight the battle, and I'd love to see that paradigm stop. But that last little statement there, kind of having respect for the enemy, they're like you, just on the other side, fighting a battle for what they think is right. And, you know, it's kind of almost that the two wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah, that's very true what you say, and you do end up, even though you might hate them, with a respect for the people you're up against. In the case of Hard Rain in the book, we're talking of a terrorist guerrilla war fought in Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom, which changes a lot of aspects of the term warfare. I mean, you'll hear the term, if you were in Northern Ireland, troubles, rather than war. And I think that was just to try and soften it somewhat. But to me, troubles sound like someone parking their car in your parking place every day. Whereas in this case, it was people blowing people to pieces or shooting them or taking them, dragging them out their house and kneecapping them in front of their families, things like this. So a pretty brutal thing, which you can hate people for, but also in what they're doing and why they were doing it initially, you can have some respect for. But it's like a lot of things. It's like politicians. They enter politics with a lot of high ideals and soon become corrupted by the system. And I think this very much is what happened in Northern Ireland with the IRA and then the provisional IRA and all the other splinter groups that emerged from that. And it it's tough. In my first posting into a war zone in what is now Yemen, the enemy would distance in the fact that they were a different race, a different culture. I didn't understand them, their language, or anything like that. Whereas suddenly I'm on home territory,
Yeah.
facing people with the same culture, same beliefs as the rest of us, and that changes the way you behave and the way
Mm.
you try and combat terrorism.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
It's much as like what is happening in America right now. It's like military's being set against its own. And it's like these are just politicians kind of moving pieces on the pole. They're not facing the people. And it's like this is just very often hysteria getting out of control. As you said, the IRA, they had a reason for what they were doing, the standing up. And then it just kind of got well, militarized and terrorized along the way and kind of lost its message. And this is what happens when things build up on each other and it kind of loses its core reason. And then it becomes almost hysteria at a point.
Yes, it does. And, you can, as you said in America, we the same in Northern Ireland, you put soldiers on the street
Hmm.
um, and to act as peacekeepers. But it only takes a few people, fanatics maybe, not the
Mm,
rest of the population, to throw petrol bombs or
yeah,
nail bombs or take a few shots at some of the soldiers. And it changes the whole
yeah,
complex of the thing. The whole texture suddenly it's gone from being a nice, warm, stodgy mess to a liquid that tastes vile.
yeah.
And it's very difficult for soldiers to cope with that. Um,
Or to keep a level head, at what point
well,
do you engage? At what
exactly.
point do you restrain?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And it's very easy when one shot's fired for many shots to be fired.
yes.
Um, and somebody would turn around and say, "Well, who told you to shoot? What were you shooting at?"
Hmm.
Well, I was shooting because he was shooting,
Yes,
and
yes.
so it spreads.
Yes, and that's
Um,
how it starts. That's how
yeah,
it starts, and
exactly,
then escalates to a point of beyond reason. It's like an argument. Well, you said, and then everybody forgot what they initially said. It's now become a volcanic eruption, right?
exactly.
And this is, but when you've got a gun in the hand, a
Yeah,
weapon in the hand, you do not want that escalation. You do want things to de-escalate and calm down. Otherwise, next thing you know, it's an outright war.
exactly. This is where good discipline and good command and control by
Mm,
the officers and NCOs on the ground comes in. Without that, it can become a bloodbath bath quite quickly. It's very
yeah.
difficult to restrain it once discipline is lost.
Yeah, and you say in your opening part there, like you can't kind of take somebody else's life, whether they're the enemy or not, without it having an impact. And a few years ago, I interviewed a gentleman called Stephen Gillian, uh, who was an Irish boy during the conflict, and he had left the house when he shouldn't have. He was 7 years of age, and the shooting started, and he hid behind a hedge and uh, and this young man got shot and he's lying kind of huddled underneath the hedge on the other side, and he's a young man that's been shot and he's dying. All he's doing is calling for his mother,
Yes,
and this 7-year-old is witnessing this, which changed his life. He actually became, through other circumstances, he became a criminal, until eventually he turned his life around completely. And you never know how violence seen early, or having to participate in violence when merely you're peaceful in your heart, how it's going to change you. And there's no getting away with it. It will change you.
yeah. It certainly does. And the things you see and do will affect you for your whole life. They'll
Hmm.
never leave you. You can turn your lives around like the young man, Stephen, I think you said his name
Yeah.
was, has done. And that takes a lot of courage to do that,
Yeah.
and I'm pleased for him. Um, but for a soldier, you expect at some stage to go into combat.
Mm,
You don't want war,
no.
but you've trained for it, and you're protecting your country and uh, people of that country. If it's not your own, you're trying to protect them from whatever is
Hmm.
attacking them. And once you're in that combat and things are happening, your training and discipline take over, and
Yeah.
also your sense of survival take over.
Hmm.
It's afterwards, um, not necessarily the next day or the day after that. It could be a year later or longer. Um, it comes back to you. It comes
Yeah.
back to you. And I mean, I don't know to this day, not just in my uh, on the military side of it, but on my mountaineering experiences, how I've actually survived.
Yeah.
Um, and I always say, well, perhaps God's got something else he wants me to do. And in the book, The Central Hard Rain, the central character, Bomber Brown, or perhaps I should explain why he's
Hmm.
called Bomber, is
Hmm.
that anybody with the name Brown in the British Army automatically gets nicknamed Bomber. Um,
Okay.
if if his name's White, he'll be called Chalky. You know, if his name's Clark, he'll be called Nobby. I don't know why, but it just happens like that. And that there was a great uh, First World War poem written by Robert Service um, about a soldier called Bomber Bill, which is uh, I digress, but that probably part of it as well.
Mhm.
Um, I think that the central character in Hard Rain, he suffers greatly from a dream that tends to haunt him, and that
Post-traumatic stress.
yeah, and that
Mm,
stems back to his first um, period of combat in what is now the Yemen. Um, and but that carries on for years and years, and people will see it in Hard Rain, plus the follow-on book as well. It reoccurs in there. So that is what happens to soldiers. Something, it could be a friend being killed, it could be them
mhm.
killing someone else close up. One little thing will always come back and haunt them.
Yes.
Um, and you have to have a mechanism to deal with that.
Hmm.
I had a number of mechanisms. Firstly, I had a wonderfully understanding wife, my late wife Carol, who actually started me writing. Um, and I had my mountaineering and rock climbing career, which once I was on a big rock face climbing, nothing else mattered. I was constantly
Mm,
focused on the next move. And then thirdly, I had my religion.
hmm.
You know, I've whether I've known it or not, from an early age, I've always believed in God. I
Hmm.
didn't perhaps understand what I believed in.
Right.
I think I do now a little more. And those three things together, I think, helped me through everything um, uh, in
Well,
my
kind
military
of your
life.
wife became your foundation. Your rock climbing became your discipline, right? And your faith became your trust.
Mm.
So,
That's a very good way to put it. Yeah, thank you.
and having interviewed many, many a veteran over the years, it's the one thing that I do know, as I said, I give peace a chance. I'm an anti-warer, but one thing I really do admire is whatever discipline you had to have on the front, you bring back to your life. And it then becomes something that, for many of them, they've seen something they needed that's not there, and then they've created it themselves. And
Yeah.
because of that discipline, because of understanding what's needed, and also just doing it, right?
Mm.
Like you writing the books, it's been cathartic for you, it's been informative for people. And it's been also an education to people to actually understand really what post-traumatic stress is. And you've done it in a factional story, fact fictionalized.
Yeah.
And for sometimes people can't read the hardcore fact, but they can read it in a fictional story because it's arm's length, and that way they can take it in more, because it's hard to take in,
Yeah.
what a person is doing. And even the reader can become traumatized if they're just reading it as fact. But when it has fiction, kind of the person almost becomes the hero. It's arm's length, and that kind of education, and it more and more that we need, as people are so ready to be trigger happy right now. More and more we need to understand the soldier's point of view, the price that is to be paid, not only
Mm.
by the person who receives the bullet, but the person that's firing the bullet.
Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, I often see things on the television, films or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and how the directors film something, um, and try to make all the gory details in it. Um, in real life, you don't have that time to take that in when
No,
you're in combat. There's no slow motion replay. Your adrenaline's bursting through you, and you fired a shot, someone's gone down, you're already running on to the next thing, um, not knowing whether it's you going to be shot next or you're going to shoot the other person next. And I think in a book, unlike a film, the reader forms their own picture in their mind through the words of what's happening and how
mm-hmm.
it's happened, and they can do it at whatever speed they want.
Yes, and
So
whatever filter of how they want
yes,
to see it. Yeah,
exactly. Whereas with a film,
in
it's
your
done
face.
for you,
Mm-hmm.
and there isn't any escaping that. So that sometimes comes a bit, unrealistic. And our hero in the book, Bomber Brown, is a bit like me. He's not a 6'6" Superman. He's a 5'8" fairly fit, regular guy, and who's just been a soldier from the age of 15.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets on with the job. Um, and like me, he's got this really stubborn, obstinate streak, which doesn't allow him to back down,
Mm.
which I think in the end
It's what
might
saves him.
be his undoing.
Undoing, or maybe what saved him. And
Could be both. Could
it's
be both.
six half a dozen, right? Because you look at it, and it's that that stubborn streak is what had you keep going forward.
Yeah.
And not taking the next bullet, but also at the same time, it's keep going back for more. It's
Yeah.
your 40 years in the business. So yes.
Well, yeah, it was a long. I mean, I joined at 15 as a what they call a junior leader, so I wasn't allowed to be sent on operations till I was 17, which they did pretty
Still
quickly when I
17.
reached 17. Um, and having worked my way up through the ranks, um, to as high as I could go, as a non-commissioned officer, and then I received a commission from the ranks, what they call a late entry commission. Um, and I was able to continue to serve on. But fortunately, by that stage, I was out of the frontline duties. So it allowed me to carry on until I was 55, which
Mm.
was kind of good. I
And
enjoyed.
there's only so much. I was talking to another veteran, a doctor. Actually, we were talking about parenting, and how much fathers need to be there. And of course, it's hard for military people because in a lot of ways, they've gone off and fought, and they come home and they want to take command of the household, and the woman goes, well, you've
Yeah.
been away, I've been commander in chief here,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly right.
And this isn't your military base. So, and there's an adjustment there completely. And, but, for so many, it's, he was talking about a particular elite group, and they are what I call on all the time.
Mm.
No, there can't even be a crack, right? But what happens? It ends up being suicide.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that crack, if you don't have that decompress, if you don't have that time to remove yourself, it's I love a willow tree because the branches know how to move with the wind, but other trees, a good gale comes along and it breaks the branch. And
Yeah.
so we really have to find a way, no matter where you are, whatever you're doing, to decompress, to absorb what's happened, because at some point everybody has a breaking point.
Yes, that's exactly right. They do. And I think the hardest thing in individuals, especially the elite soldiers and servicemen, is that they have to have some mechanism where they can recognize in themselves.
Yeah.
And I recognized in myself, I got to a point where it was a combination of if I didn't change what I was doing,
Mm,
I was either going to be dead or in prison.
yeah.
One of those two things. Um, but I didn't want to leave the army.
Mm,
Um, so I made a couple of tough choices and abandoned my career in the infantry and uh, applied to get into an elite band in its way, but not as one thinks of like uh, the US SEALs or the
hmm
SAS, uh, which was a thing called the Army Physical Training Corps, which has a job of keeping everybody in the army fit to fight. But
mm,
they also do go on operations with them.
hmm
There's one in every unit. But it's tough to get into. I mean, I went on a selection course with 55 people, and I was the oldest by, well, the younger ones called me granddad.
Oh
Uh,
my God.
and it's 3.5 months selection, and at the end of it, five of us got through, and I was lucky to be one of them.
Wow. There you go.
But then you have another almost 9 months more training, and every 3 months you're assessed. So quite a tough thing to get into, but it gave me a chance to do the second thing in my life that I loved um, more than actually soldiering on the front line, which was mountaineering and climbing and
Mm,
all those sort of things. So it was good for me, and I did get to that point where I recognized,
hmm
I had to make a change.
Yes.
Um, and but many people can't do that,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that's
they're
when
they're too in it, or there isn't an option.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Although one of my friends, and under a different name, is in the book, actually says once you're in, you're in,
hmm
and there isn't any getting out of it. Um, and I think in some ways he meant he was a very experienced man, older than me at the time. Um, and I think in some ways he meant that even if you're out of the front line, you'll still replay it in your head
Yeah.
many times over,
Mm.
which
My
is,
grandfather was a colonel in the British Army in India,
oh,
and my mother left India when she was 12, and she was one of the youngest of the siblings, and went to England, and she was told her father was dead, only to find out that he was alive, that he was put in an institution for a breakdown, which most probably was post-traumatic stress,
yeah,
right? And of course, back then, my father died at 45, had a heart attack at 40. He was a squadron leader, fighter pilot. And the
gosh,
amount of times he'd come in with his, tail on fire. And at the end of the war, I think there were two or three of them left, and all of them died before 45. Uh,
um,
and because it was, typical British thing, suck it up, stiff upper lip, man, get on with your life, and nobody allowed to talk about it.
yes.
And, you can't, you have to talk about it. So, did you find a way to talk about it, or has the book been your voice?
Well, the book really, people used to ask me about my time in the army and be at dinner or whatever, and I tell a funny story.
Yeah.
That was the easy way out. And then when my late wife was seriously ill and dying, um, a lot of time in the house, time on her hands, she started writing short stories about a friend's dog,
Mhm.
which inspired me. Her courage was phenomenal to be able to do that. And because I had a lot of time when she was resting on my hands, I
Mhm.
thought perhaps I'll just try my hand at this. And um, very naively, I started on The Walls of the Radfan, the first book, which needs completely redoing in my mind now. Uh, and within 6 months, I'd finished it, and I was then starting Hard Rain,
Mhm.
um, and not really knowing what to do with what I'd written.
Yeah.
And a friend said, "Why don't you send it off to a publisher?" So I just clicked onto the computer as you do, and first one came up with an A, Austin Macaulay, and I sent The Wolves of Radfan off to them. And then 6 weeks later, I got an envelope in the post saying we'd like to publish your book. Um,
That is very
and
rare.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's what everybody said to me that
Hmm.
they've done some writing. One chap who's quite a well-known writer, he'd had about 20 books published. He said to me, well, he said it took me 15 goes before anybody took
Yeah,
mine.
my brother's a professional writer, and even when you
Yeah,
do get a publisher,
yeah,
it's a nightmare. So yeah, you were very fortunate.
yeah. Well,
But obviously the story had an impact.
yeah, and I think for me, it was just like everything was flooding out of me. And I was
Mm,
tapping away at the keyboard. Um, Full stops, commas, things like that didn't mean anything. I
no,
was
no.
just writing
You're
away,
downloading.
throwing out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that was my really big release. Okay, it's based on my experiences. It's based on other people's experiences uh, and stories that I've been told and heard. Um, but and then of course my imagination comes into it. Um, and so I've done it as military, historical military fiction. And I think that's the way it should stay. I think if
Mm.
I tried to write it as anything as an autobiography, it would have been so boring.
Oh,
The
probably too
paper,
heavy as well.
sorry?
Too heavy.
Yeah,
Yeah, when
much,
people know
much
it's
too
actually,
heavy.
I mean, they know when
Yeah,
they're reading this that this is, this is actually happening. But as I said, it's the arm's length. If
yeah,
you're reading a biography, it's like, God, how did they do this? How did they do that? How did they get through that? But when you're reading it as a fictional, it's you kind of remove yourself from, that anxiety around what the person's going through and kind of more into the wonderment and excitement of what is next.
yeah, yeah. That is right. And I, I I've tried to keep everything that I did in Hard Rain, especially. Um, based on actual things that did happen,
Hmm.
such as
Times and places have
yeah,
changed, or yeah,
yeah, and
names.
the organizations concerned.
Hmm.
Um, and one person, an ex-military friend of mine, who was actually our unit's medical sergeant that I had a lot of dealings with, uh, uh, said to me, he said, "I'm glad you've changed the names to protect the guilty." I said, "Well, that's not quite how it's not quite how it's meant." Um, and but he thought that was I
That's a
should
good
have put
statement.
something
I
like
like
that
that.
in the book.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Um, and the thing is especially today, I wish more and more of this type of thing was encouraged to be read by teenagers because they do see video games, they do see shows where, it's just a boom, 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 dead, 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 no consequences, go on to kill a dozen more, you notch in the belt. And it's almost removed them from any accountability or empathy or compassion. And it's like, we are seeing more and more, kids out today. And I produced a book last year, Our Forgotten Children, an anthology around how we're letting our children down with the system. And one of them is that we're not teaching them that accountability, that connection, um, even a sense of respect or self-respect.
Yeah,
And they're going out and killing people just to feel something. And
yeah,
so it's sad to see that. And I think if they read something like this and really saw the repercussions because you were kind of quite licensed to kill, right? But there are repercussions even in that. And I think if they understood that, would they be so eager?
I yeah, I understand that completely because I see it today, and I especially in my grandchildren. Um, they're on these things, and to them it is modern life.
Yeah,
Um, and you can do all this on the computer. And now in Great Britain, we've got this massive crime wave of children with knives
yeah.
stabbing other children,
Yes,
killing them.
we've got some cases over here as well
Terrible.
for fun because they want to feel something, or
Yeah.
their peers dare them to do it. Like,
Mm.
where are your boundaries? Where do you actually look at this person as a life?
Yeah.
This isn't your enemy. You're just trying to feel something, and you feel by taking someone else's life, you're going to feel it. I
Yeah.
guarantee later on that's going to catch up and not be the feeling you wanted.
No, no, exactly. And that they don't understand that that is their life ruined forever
Yes,
until the day they die and they answer to God in heaven, if there's a God in heaven, which whether they believe in it or not. Um, there is always a reckoning for everything you do. There is always a reckoning.
your
Um,
conscience will catch up with you.
you can't, it's, and I
Can't
don't
escape it.
know, I don't know where we're going to go with this. It worries me.
Yeah.
My grandchildren worry me, because they come here and spend time here, and we have a great day out by the pool, or we go out on a boat and we do some swimming in the sea, all the things that you normally do. And then they come back, even in the car, they're straight on that thing in front of their
Mm,
face, and there's no talking.
right.
And they'll go to their rooms, and I started, particularly on the last time they were here on holiday, of making them come down, and we played cards. I made
Hmm.
it fun because whoever won a hand could pick something nice out of this big basket of goodies. So whoever won a hand, they got to pick, and did little things like that, and played and read stories,
Yes.
um, because they don't have that in their lives. And
No.
to me, that's well, I feel sad. I actually feel
Yeah.
really sad about it.
They're
It's
constantly on social media. You see, m- people our age. I'm 70, so I don't know what you are, but I'm so glad that I existed or had a youth before all of this. And we're not flippantly saying that. Is that we really did get out there and play, get out there and communicate, get out there and meet people. And now everything is done, through mobile. That um it's not just changing the posture, it's changing the posture of their connection. And they
Yeah.
just don't know how to communicate with each other anymore, other than, emojis and cryptic stuff. And it's like, have you seen the great TV series Adolescence?
Yes. Yeah.
And, like this kid killing another kid
Yeah. Yeah.
because of humiliation on Instagram.
Mm.
Right. And, the cop and his father saying to the cop, this means this means that, this means that. And it's like, it's such a different world to what the father grew up in. And then all these emojis now mean something that is belittling. And,
Yeah.
kids are taking it on as an affront and thinking that it's okay to eliminate somebody because of it.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
yeah, that one scene of the kids in the classroom, total disrespect of the teachers or any authority or any adult.
Yeah.
It's oof, yeah, it's become very
Well,
thugism.
yeah. I mean, I'm not a fan of corporal punishment in schools, but when I was at school, and I'm a bit older than you, Sarah, quite a bit. You're a very young lady to me. And,
Don't
and
always feel it.
well, you look it.
Thank you.
Um, and every teacher, apart from old Mr. Pierce, our art teacher, had their own personal thing for dishing out corporal punishment. It could have
Hmm.
been a dowel rod, it could have been the old sole of a tennis shoe, a leather strap. But disrespect like that was not
Yeah,
taken lightly.
no.
Yeah, and I never liked that. But I got, I'm suddenly beginning to feel that that should come back into schools.
In
Um,
some form or other, yes. And, if the thing is, it's like the violence, no, perhaps, but most certainly accountability needs to be taught. That
yeah,
action equals that accountability, which equals that punishment. And of course, I think the punishment for them wouldn't be the rule or wouldn't be any of that because, quite honestly, they'll just go, child abuse.
yeah,
In
exactly.
instead, it's like, where does it hit them? And that is, no phone, no internet,
Yeah,
right? None of that taken away from them. And now you are now forced to, I would like for people who text and drive or drink and drive, I would have them go and work in a morgue for a while,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And for people that bully other kids, go into an association where a child has been bullied to traumatize and see the effect of it. And I think
yeah,
what it is rather like what we're seeing on TV is the arm's length, no accountability.
yeah,
And that is, I think, what needs to be taught, but we do need to look at it from a different point of view.
yeah. And I think it it needs to be taught at home by the parents the time um, children are born.
Yeah,
Um, you know,
kindness, respect, yes.
yeah, exactly. And sorry, you can't do that. And if the child screams and shouts it, put it in the corner, leave it there.
Yeah,
Um, you know, you don't have to have a violent punishment, as you
right.
said. You can take the phone away, or cancel their internet connection for a
Mm-hmm.
month.
Mm-hmm.
You can do these things, but the trouble is, we've now got probably one, maybe two generations of parents that have already gone past that themselves as
Yes.
children. Um, and we're into a third generation. In
Mm.
Northern Ireland, for instance, which the book is all based about, we had three generations of children who thought it was normal to be told to come out on the street and throw rocks and petrol bombs and things like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, because you know, they hadn't
That
known
was their
anything else.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The man with the gun, who's the
Mm.
big man on the block, said, "You've got to go out there." So we all
Mm-hmm.
go out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in cases in Northern Ireland, I know where people refuse to do that. In one case, uh, a Catholic lady who stood up on her estate against the IRA, she was dragged out um, by gunmen, put in a car, driven off somewhere remote, and murdered,
Mm-hmm.
as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I remember
and
the tar and feather.
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
do you even know what it is, listeners? Tar and feather. They would roll people up in hot tar and feather them, and
Yeah,
literally their skin would, they would be
blister off.
suffocating underneath.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, such horrific things. Another chap I knew who was suspected of talking to the police. Young guy was taken out, and they just used electric drill and drilled through his kneecaps, you
Ugh.
know, and dumped him on the street as an example. So
You
this
see,
is sort of,
that's where you're fighting against something, and then it turns to what I call fuggism,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
of course, this is what we're seeing in America right now, because I'm in Canada, I'm right next door. So, we're seeing that there's a certain group, they just can't wait
mm,
we saw them on the January 6th
yeah,
event a few years ago. They just can't wait to take up arms. Just give them a reason. Just
yeah,
give them the okay. And
mm,
they're the people that will go out and do it in some sort of name of something or
yeah,
under certain person's command. And it's all about fuggism for them because they're people that are lacking within themselves, most certainly lacking compassion or understanding, and probably, little boys inside. They're
mm.
just wanting some attention, and it's all about anger. And when you have a cause that people are standing up for, and then somebody brings their anger to the table, then it can change on a dime and change meaning altogether.
That's exactly how it happens. And when you said thuggism, that was exactly right. The whole object of the RA and provisional RA in these cases was to exert control over the people.
Yeah.
Um, and their own communities, had to toe the line
Hmm.
to the man with the gun.
Yeah.
And most of these people turned to some form of criminal activities later on.
Hmm.
And even now, many are probably involved in the gangs, criminal gangs there in Northern Ireland at the moment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
It's a
unfortunately,
lot
it
of
almost gets passed down from generation to generation. If you're born into
Mhm.
that, it's very hard to get out of that, right?
Yeah, if you're in a family and everybody looked up to Uncle Jim
Yeah.
because he was a head honcho in the IRA, um, and it's continually drummed into you,
Hmm.
you're going to want to do that yourself. I
Yeah,
mean, one
exactly.
of the big one of the big problems in Ireland and Northern Ireland was um, both with school and religion. Not all, but in most schools and religions, the schools were separated. You had the Catholic schools, the Protestant schools, and you had firebrands in those institutions who would, promote their cause. And you actively had um, clergy um, supporting terrorism,
Yeah.
working for the terrorists, and so on. And I bring that to light in the follow-on book to Hard Rain, which doesn't have a nice ending, but it shows clearly the part that some of the clergy were playing, mostly on one side rather than the other. But there were um, some
They were
terrible
not being
things happened
godly.
in the region.
Yeah, they were not being godly. They were
No, no,
using that religion as a
yeah,
weapon. And, this is, what we're seeing a lot over here with Christianity. And, it says if your God says that because somebody's different color, different sexuality, different economics, or different faith, that they're evil, then clearly you're not getting the right message from God, right?
yeah,
It becomes a human
yeah,
use of religion, not a God's choice of religion.
no,
And it's all a manipulation. And we see that so much. Let's look at the Crusaders. Let's look at all, a lot of religions, wars that have happened. And it's all about control and power. It's never
yeah,
about the God. So,
yeah, yeah. That's exactly right. I believe that wholeheartedly. And you know, the God I worship is a loving God, and
yes,
I mean, this, He's made us, and the goodness is in us. We
yes.
we just need to let it come out, rather than
Yeah, yeah, the devil and God are in every one of us, and it all comes out in our actions. And
yeah,
if we're cruel to other people in any form, that's the devil having a voice. And if we are kind and compassionate and considerate, that's the God action. And that there isn't any heaven and hell; it's in us. We're either
yeah,
going to live in a heavenly way or a hell way, and that's our choice, or sometimes a
yeah,
choice that's imposed upon us.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, we can have these things put upon us, um, and sometimes you're in situations
Mm,
where um, you can't get out of it.
right.
The only because, as in Northern Ireland, people were told to do a certain thing, or a family member would be killed.
Mm,
And who do you turn to?
yes.
That's the problem. If your neighbors are exactly in the same position, I often said that you have to stand up to these bullies, even though they may be armed with guns. But you've got to do it in a way that doesn't get you killed or your
Because
family.
you've got to do it intelligently and you've got to do it collectively, right?
Exactly.
Because what does the bully have the power over? I'm standing here with the gun and I'm imposing fear on you, right?
Mm.
But if everybody stands up, like we had a few weekends ago, I think something 11 or 12 million people throughout America, no
Yeah.
King's March. When
Well,
people come together and say no to the bully, well, the bully, actually generally becomes the coward because they don't want somebody, it's easy to bully two or three people, but when
Yeah.
you've got a mass, where do you see them? They run.
Yeah. Yeah. When 11 million people start marching down the road towards you,
Yeah,
it's time to
exactly.
turn. Yeah.
I suggest you put your running
And,
shoes on.
change your ways. That's
Yes.
definitely right. Yeah. No, that's and again, this comes out, I think, in Hard Rain, um, in different formats with how the communities react to certain
Mhm.
things and how they reacted to the soldiers
Yeah.
being on the streets.
Did you
Um,
see the movie Belfast?
yes, yes.
And how realistic is it from your experience?
Um,
Obviously, it's around one family, so their family
yeah,
reaction.
I think it was relatively true
Hmm.
to how things were at that time. And of course, the problem is, like you write a book or you do a film about an instant in time, um, things change quite quickly. And in 30 years of a terrorist war in Northern Ireland, things were constantly evolving.
Mm,
I mean, when I first went there, at the very beginning of the Troubles, the sort of orders for um, opening fire, how to deal with the various things, had a lot of leeway in them. But later on, as things developed, and communications got more instant, television crews were constantly
mm,
there, um, and getting tipped off by the terrorists, oh, we're going to blow up the army
right.
barracks at so and so. You know something was going to happen because there were a dozen
The
film
press of
crews down
air.
the
Yeah.
road,
Yeah.
TV from Belgium and France, so um, you started to take precautions. But so things had to change because of that.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it ended up with a situation where you were like a boxer in a boxing ring. You had two opponents, and then the referee said, "No, you're a little bit too good. We're going to tie one hand behind your back."
Uh-huh.
And uh, and then on the next round, he said, "No, you're still good. We're going to tie your other one behind your back."
Uh-huh.
And so in the end, you were just trying to headbutt everybody, but like banging your head against the wall. And the security forces were getting uh, uh, hampered by restrictions due to politicians' fears, um, and because of some incidents that happened which got out of control. Bloody Sunday being one of them. Um, we'll never ever get the real truth of what happened there. I don't ever believe we will. But the other problem was, of course, as agreements got made and we got towards a peace deal, the government at the time gave known murderers a get out of jail free card, known bombers a get out of jail free card, but didn't give any protection to the security forces or the police. And
Mm.
therefore, we see
Retaliation.
84-year-old soldiers being brought back on under some accusations in Northern Ireland to stand trial. In one particular case, the soldier died of a heart attack anyway, while he was on trial. And most of the accusations were spurious and 30 years old, or 20 years old,
Mm.
or 40 years old. Um, so again, the security services um, had a raw deal
Uh-huh.
because politicians, a bit like children today on their iPads,
Hmm.
are not in touch with reality a lot of the time.
Right. You weren't
They're
there,
own,
mate.
they're
Yeah.
in touch with their own careers and their little standing in their own little political group, and not in touch with the people. That's a big problem, I feel.
And I think that we need to take those politicians and even just one day put them on the front lines. Let them have a taste of what's going on.
Yeah,
Right? It's very easy to move things, from a distance and be all highfalutin, but be there on the
yeah.
front thing and feel for yourself. Why the title Hard Rain?
Um, when I first started writing, I thought, well, what am I going to call this? And I called it the hate or the hatred. Um, and while I was writing it, I remembered just how much it rain we seemed to get,
Mhm.
and how much it came down, and but it didn't matter how much it rained, it never seemed to cleanse the streets
Mm,
of the bloodshed. And then it put me back to made me think back to ancient civilizations where things weren't going right, so they had a sacrifice a human being, have a blood
mm,
sacrifice, and if that one didn't work, you sacrifice a lot more people. Um, and I kind of thought, well, I'll change the title and call it Hard Rain, and the hard part being the security forces, well, hard rain being the security forces trying to wash the streets clean of all the hatred and the blood. Um, and I take my hat off to some of the people in the security forces who, especially on the intelligence side, who spent virtually the whole career there
mm,
fighting this. Not like me, I escaped it after about 6, 7 years. So
mm.
um, that
Still a
they
long time.
spend a whole long lifetime
Yes.
coping with it.
Yeah. And, imagine the trauma of that. And, a lot of people don't even know, what this IRA war was all about. And, it is, Protestant versus Catholic. And,
Yeah.
going down to it, when we look at all these wars, it's either, about power, money, or religion.
Mm.
Those are generally the three denominators, we got somebody over in America right now that wants to be a dictator, you know, and
Yes.
actually was caught saying the other day, and I like the Korean dictator, I want my people to bow down to me like they do to him, right?
Yes.
And it's like that is not what power is about. Power is
No.
about empowering other people,
Right.
not people worshiping you, because I call that the ivory tower syndrome. While you're busy in the ivory tower, you know counting your gold, you're actually hurting all the people that are maintaining your foundation, and at
Yeah.
some point that foundation is going to crumble and you're going to topple. It's just a
Yeah.
matter of time.
The I think yes, and I think power was one of the things. I mean, to really understand the Irish problem, you have to go back 350 years
Mm-hmm.
to William of Orange and the Battle of the Boyne and all this. Um, but then in more recent times, if you go back to the 1920s,
Mm-hmm.
when England and Ireland agreed that Ireland should become a separate country. Um, but um, that should be a referendum by the people, by counties. Um, and this is how we ended up with the 6 counties of Northern Ireland. They voted to stay part of Great Britain, and the rest wanted to be a separate country. And that was all agreed to, and everybody seemed to be happy except for the RRA, who then tried to force their own Irish government and their own people by force and killing people
Mm-hmm.
to take over the 6 counties. Fortunately, the Irish people weren't having it, and they put a stop to it. But many people also forget that the Irish Republican Army supported Nazi Germany in the Second World War,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they started a bombing campaign in England during the war in support of Nazi Germany. Fortunately, they were caught by the security service and swept up quite quickly. But
I mean, they did that in the
people
70s as
forget
well,
that.
because I remember my brother, you know, walking towards a phone booth to make a call, and he's just a few yards away from it, and it blows up. Right. So,
Absolutely.
and it's that's what they would do, little bombs placed here and there,
Yeah.
just purely for terror. That's
Yeah.
terrorism.
Exactly.
It's just purely, you don't know where we are, when we are, we're just going to cause terror, which we're seeing so much now, more on the Islamic side of things. But it's always, I don't know what people gain from terrorism, because ultimately everyone loses.
Yeah.
Whatever these people are that want power and want to be in power, even Putin will have his fall. Everybody will eventually. It's how many people do have to pay the price in the meantime.
Yeah.
And we all have to stand up against it. But until we understand it, we don't know what we're standing up against. And you writing this book and describing a period of time and the conflict and what a soldier goes through, but the reality, as I said, you've fictionalized it just to make it easier, but the reality of what somebody goes through, I think if more people read it, there'll be less war like, probably less following, you know, the emperor with no clothes type of thing,
Yeah, yeah.
and fight back on it. So, the thing about this kind of book is there's something I would like to see in schools, most certainly in the libraries, and more, teachers having the gumption to say, this is part of the curriculum. Because
Yeah,
if we don't understand our history, all we do is go and repeat it. Different
ex-
players, different religions, different places, the same old crap.
yeah, yeah. We've got to learn by what has happened in the past, and
Yeah.
the only way we can do that is study history.
Yes.
Um, and the one thing that people should understand, which I don't perhaps think's come out that well in the book, is that soldiers, servicemen are the last people that want war,
Yeah.
because they're the reason they're there is because if the country next door sees you're a strong country with a strong military, it's not liable to want to start a
Mhm.
fight with you. But if it sees you're weak and you've got things that they want and they've got guns, they know they can march in. So it's striking this balance. And um, I think what's happened with America and their president at the moment has spurred NATO, European NATO, on to become stronger and spend more money on defense.
It has here in Canada because we're known as the peaceful country,
Yeah,
right? And now we're putting money in our defense and kind of, in many ways, cutting ourselves off from America, which is, most of the people I generally interview are from America, and they all apologize to me. I'm so sorry for what we're doing to you because insisting the 51st state, right? Fortunately, we have a great leader who took England through Brexit, Mike
indeed.
Carney, and we're very happy with him because he's a no nonsense guy with a good touch of humor. And, and it's, Canada has never been one to spout ourselves. It's not about, we're the greatest country in the world, but, we're now saying we're fighting for Canada. But
Yeah,
isn't it sad that kind of one man with his stupid tariffs around the world, even on penguins, for Christ's sake,
yeah,
who knows nothing about history or nothing really about politics or nothing about any of the countries? It's all about resources and power, that he should kind of take a sledgehammer to the unison that we had, the camaraderie we had with other countries, and just smash it to pieces.
yeah,
And, we as the people have to pick up those pieces and put it back together with
yeah,
trust and with, again, compassion for each other and go, no, we're not going to let this happen. It's not
yeah,
about taking up arms, it's about really coming together. But the arms, I think, in this case, yes, we need the military, because if you've seen the movie Civil War, right, in the third term, we do need that. But at the same time, I think that our weapon of choice right now is voice,
yeah,
unison of voice. And, we need to keep speaking, we need to keep pushing back, and we need being heard in any way, which way we can.
yeah. And that's like good neighbors standing up to the bully.
Yes.
In this case, it's countries,
Mm.
the whole of Western Europe and England and Canada, I think, and even Australia and South Africa are
Yeah.
speaking with one voice at the moment.
Yes.
Um,
Absolutely.
and that this is important because it's the only way that you can deal with a bully, whether it's Putin or
The
China
Israeli
or
guy, you know,
or
um,
um,
yeah,
or your neighbor.
Germany. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, it's like, we went through. I mean, England went through Brexit, but we went through the virus that is already having repercussions. Now, and now we're going through this mm, basically kind of economic and power war that's going on, and everybody is just like spent. We're
Mm.
tired of this. Like in the First World War, Second World War, even the war that you had, people came together for a reason. and people looked out for each other and people supported each other. Here, people are just feeling fractured, that they just
Yeah.
don't know. Where do I go? What do I do? How do I do it? How do I don't want to be saturated with this, but at the same time, I want to stand up. And it's a
Yeah.
different form of war right now, isn't it?
It is. And as we've seen in the conventional war, it's changing. It's becoming more reliant on drones, not only in the air, but on the ground
Yeah.
and on the sea.
And a
Um,
cowardice way of doing it, right? Because you're not
well,
looking at the enemy in the eyes, so to speak.
no, but in Ukraine's case, it's the only way they
Right.
can combat the Russian manpower
Yeah.
situation, and of course the North Korean manpower, which is joining in on it. Um, but it we can see war in the future becoming very much like one of these computer games.
Yes,
Um,
unfortunately.
and
Mm.
it will mean nothing to the operator that he wipes out a town of 20,000 people,
Right.
because it's
Yeah.
just done on the computer.
Right. It's
And
just like,
until,
as you said, a video game, no consequences. And
yeah,
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 generally a young person hasn't been taught,
no,
that this is a human life. These are innocent lives, and you are just a pawn to push that button
yeah,
for somebody else who just wants power.
yeah,
So
exactly.
we have to question our leaders. Why are we doing this? And I know an awful lot of military that said I could not stand with the military anymore, because we felt like pawns. We felt like we were just being shoved to this war and that war, where
Yeah,
it was all avoidable, like this Iran one right now. And people are saying, I'm willing to stand up and fight for my country if there's a true enemy and not just a political enemy.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's something politicians need to understand. Um, Putin doesn't understand it. That's why he has so many people that he pushes to the front line deserting. I
Yes.
mean, when they originally invaded Ukraine and were heading to Kyiv, some Russian soldiers that were captured said, "Well, we didn't know we were going to war. We were told we were on an exercise
Yeah.
with Ukraine. We were just going, we didn't even know we were going to fire a shot."
And
Um,
who were the people that they pushed on the front line? Generally the
yeah,
poor,
yeah,
none of the elite, right? And it's and you've got Mr. Orange who wants to be a Putin, and Israeli dictator. And then look what's going on with the Gaza. That is not a war. That's an annihilation.
that is. It's gone beyond the point of defeating Hamas.
Yeah,
It's gone to wiping out a complete country and its
exactly.
people. And I think that is now Israel's end game. I can't see why they're going on anymore, doing what they're doing, um, because there's nothing left anyway.
And nobody's standing up to him. Instead, you've got a president that is saying, I'm with you now, let's take on Iran. And what he's been promised is a golf course in Gaza.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, well, Gaza's going to become his holiday resort, I
you're
think.
right. Exactly. So, the thing is there used to be a certain amount of integrity and honor, and now there just seems to be nothing. And I'm going to get, and I don't care who dies for it. And whereas the soldier felt that I'm going to war for a reason, now it's like I'm going just to fatten somebody's pockets or make somebody's ego bigger. And I think, that's where I kind of think a soldier needs to look at as mass on group and go, as we've had, one of the major colonels in America saying, I am not going to send troops against our citizens.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so at some point, as people, even the military, we have to stand up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very brave him to say and do that.
Yes.
That took some real courage.
Yes. Yes.
It took some
And
real
it's the plug has to be pulled, or the rug needs to be pulled from underneath these people at the present moment. The fallout is already happening, and even once they're gone, the rebuilding is going to take a long time. But every empire falls,
Yeah.
and America was due for it. The empire is falling, and now this is a time for them to rebuild, or will be a time for them to rebuild with more integrity and more inclusion.
Yeah.
So, you know,
And remembering where they started,
yes.
how the country started and how it had to grow, because I think they're losing sight of that.
Oh, they lost
The,
sight of it,
the
I mean,
leadership that
yeah.
there.
This whole immigrant thing, everybody in America, like Canada, are immigrants except for the native Indians.
Mm,
So they actually, invaded that country and took it over. And so, I mean, all of the excuses are things that are being done right now. And I think this is where, again, a soldier fighting for something, uh, putting their life on the line, is very honorable. But when they're used as pawns just for someone's power and ego or profit, I think this is, where we also need to say, no, we
yeah,
won't send our soldiers to die for you.
yeah, and that this is what we send people into our parliaments
Yeah,
to do for us, and we have to tell them what we
yeah,
think and how we feel, and that if they don't support us, then we'll get rid of them.
exactly.
They won't get
Ex-
voted back in.
Oh, voted right out, which we need to see a lot more of that. In
Yeah.
my case, I think that every Republican that has supported him, Voldemort, one that won't be named, uh, should be criminal. We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Just go to the podcast tab at the top there and you will see all the many genres and all 3,000 shows ready for your listening. We are here to serve you, to help you on your journey of life, and we know that through inspiration it begets invitation. We are supported by you, the listeners, and those that we interview. Anything that you can spare us in donation would be greatly accepted, and we do hope that you enjoy the next show.